Somebody planted the sign way back then to signify or to give hope that this town will continue to flourish, this town will grow. So this is a stark reminder sometimes to all of us that sometimes our plans don't go the way we want to because of how impermanent life is today, how impermanent life is tomorrow, and how impermanent life will be for the rest of your life. This sign is a stark reminder of that someone had hope, people had hope. People had the foresight that one day this bustling town would be a spot for the next Kmart. I just want to reflect on the impermanence of life, the impermanence of situations, impermanence of outcomes that happens to all of us in life. We tend to forget that nothing's forever. Life's not forever, hardship's not forever, and good times aren't forever. This town is an embodiment of good intentions, but didn't last long. This was a town, it was an established town, and now there's only a few fragments of buildings left, still standing, and with a sign illustrating hope, illustrating that a town that once was would live on forever, which it hasn't. So think about that next time that you are in a difficult situation. If you're in a difficult time in your life, understand that it's not forever, that it is also impermanent. The feelings you feel, the circumstances you're in are never forever. They are impermanent. Just like with life, just like with the good times, nothing lasts forever. Always enjoy the times you have. Understand that the pain won't last forever. Understand life is impermanent. And let that make you humble, make you understand that it's not always about forever. It's about living in the today, accepting the now, and growing from it, learning from the experiences, if it's good or bad. Let that be an understanding that just like this town, which was, that the people who lived here, who moved across the country, moved across the world to settle here at some point in time in history, didn't know that this was going to be gone. A graveyard outside of this town is also a stark reminder that people thought this town would be here forever. They lived here, they died here, and they're buried here. But the town behind me is no more. The town behind me is gone, besides a few homes that a few people live in around here today. But it's no longer. I'm here in Nemiskam Cemetery, where you can tell behind me the amount of people who are buried here. And just like with the town, people had hope, people had desire to live in this town, to grow in this town. People had family, parents, grandparents who lived here, who died here, who were buried right behind me. So a town was filled with people, filled with hope. People uprooted their lives in an adjacent city, or adjacent town, sorry, and moved here when the rail line got adjusted. These people had hope. These people had clearly the signs to stay here for a long time, but as you can tell, these people have lived and died here, and unfortunately forgotten with the passage of time, just like with the city. Now, as few remaining buildings, eventually collapse, go back into the earth, that there will be no more trace of nemiskam. There'll be no more trace of that. And for those who know, nemiskam means between two coulees in Blackfoot. I know a lot of people don't enjoy walking through graveyards, and I'm not against it. I think people who were here, who lived here, who had the inspiration and aspirations to live in a town, it's good to get that. So I'm here to just see some of the people who lived here and who died here. The lesson here isn't that hope is wrong, and peace can be found on the next chapter. It's about what can be found here, right now, in what's standing.
Alright, so this used to be the old school of Etzikom. It closed down in 1984 and then became a museum in 1990. And inside we have a doll room, a town room, a homesteader room, a wildlife room, and a music room. And then outside to the left we have all of our windmills, our windmill interpretive center, and a shed with some old engines. And then outside to the right we have our Nautilus garage with 3 vintage cars and an old church. So that's what we have here. And all the dolls in the doll room were donated by the same lady. That was her entire collection. So that's pretty awesome. And the cars, who were those donated by?
The 2 Dodge cars were donated by Pat and Clay Nodwell. And then Fred Holt, I think, is the one who donated the Chrysler.
Yeah. And then all of these like plaques up here are all donations. These ones were donated in memory. Yeah.
So it's got the homesteaders, it's got their name, their land location, and what year they settled here. And then all those ones on that wall are all just general donations.
Yeah.
And as you can see, we're kind of running out of space.
Yeah. It's getting a little tight. But then, yeah, we also have a gift shop in here, and then we sell ice cream, pie, hot dog wraps, meat buns, and everything is homemade as well. There's a lady who comes in and she bakes all the pies, meat buns, hot dog wraps, everything like that. Yeah. So we can heat up the pie and give a scoop of ice cream with it, or, yeah. People like it.
Museum. And I find this Windmill Museum to be interesting because most of these windmills you see around me had different jobs as settlers came across Western Canada. The biggest problem they had was the fact that there wasn't bodies of water lying around like there is in the East. And they had various jobs to do. So, for example, that some of these windmills actually pumped water from groundwater that was close to the ground. Many other ones, you know, milled flour. But it's interesting to see these windmills here, and you don't see many of them anymore, especially out here. And the question is why? Well, the type of technology that existed back in the 1800s and 1900s were a necessity to allow people to live in this climate and to utilize the wind, which is has a fair amount here, if I may say. And these technologies from the United States and Canada were brought here, designed here, manufactured here to help farmers and families live and grow, you know, up until essentially present day, until basically internal combustion engines made things a bit easier and less expensive. But now you see around me all these windmills that are torn apart. You know, you barely see any of the fans or fins. Most of these towers are derelict in a sense, which gives you a sort of humble feeling that at some point in time, these were all useful, these were working, and they basically powered the world we have today. And this museum essentially shows you of all the benefits that came from these sorts of pieces of machinery. But it also gives you a understanding of the passage of time, that the purpose, these things were built for a purpose that no longer is needed. Essentially, windmills are in this form, not in like power generation form, but in this form, is no longer needed. You know, sure, you see some forests or some farms with these sort of things on there, but their genuine purpose is gone, right? It's a long forgotten, a long abandoned idea that's no longer practical. And that's very much like our lives. You know, at some point in time, things can be applicable, things can matter, things can be important, but in the passage of time, things improve, things get better. So some of these things that are in our past are no longer useful today. That could be things like, you know, a specific event that happened to you, either be positive or negative. But these sorts of things over time that are part of our lives are just mere derelict museum items that once had a purpose, once had a specific part in our lives that mattered, no longer needed in the present. Here's a question for you worth sitting with. What happens when there's a part of you that's moved on and the part of you that hasn't? How does that look in your life? How does that matter? When we tend to leave certain pieces of ourselves behind in those situations that have happened to us, the things that are essentially there and no longer needed. These parts of ourselves that we either leave behind in the past and we still think about, that are just artifacts of our former selves. That we're no longer that person. We're no longer that personality. things about us change, things about us evolve, things about us grow, and we may not be the same person we were 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So ask yourselves, are you living in the past? Are you not allowing yourself to grow, to improve, to become a better person than you were yesterday? This is essentially an example of that, about how useful these things were in the settlers in this part of Canada, or this part of the world, how essential these things were, that were essentially the lifeblood of being able to live and run a farm and raise a family here. But these things are no longer needed. These things are no longer useful to most of us. They are relics of the past. We can remember them, we can admire their beauty, admire their usefulness, but accept the fact that in time, these things are no longer needed and have to be left in the past, have to be not forgotten, but just remembered, just like specific facets of our own lives, different parts that we no longer need, that don't serve us well, or maybe served us at that time, but as we grow and evolve, we don't need it anymore. That perhaps those parts of us can end up in your own museum, your own interpretive museum of the fact that you can see the growth and evolution of yourself, and looking back at the little parts that made you who you are today. We don't need to forget the past. We don't have to dwell on the past. We can simply remember and remind ourselves the parts of ourselves that we left behind, the parts of ourselves that made us to who we are as a human being, brought us to this point in our lives. And that is important. Now, as we grow, there are going to be bigger and better things, new and improved parts of ourselves that we get to assemble, that turns into that windmill of life, that we can upgrade ourselves, that we can improve ourselves and become better than we were in the past. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with abandoning the old to focus on the new. There is nothing wrong with that. That we must accept the parts of ourselves that were and become a greatest part of ourselves that we can become, even if we can't fully envision how that may look or how that may be feeling. But we must understand at some point in time in our lives that we will get what we ask for. We will achieve what we strive for. And that in itself is the greatest thing we can do within ourselves, is to grow, to improve, to leave behind the old and focus on the new. Even if you don't know where you're going in life, most of us don't. Most of us have no idea. The greatest thing you can do is have a vision. Set some goals. Set some aspirations in yourself so that one day you can go from how you were to where you are and where you like to be. Keep those things close to you. Keep those options, goals close to your heart, close to your mind, and work incrementally every single day, little by little, chip by chip. And over time, you'll be looking back and understand where you were and see now where you are. out here, the road is more than a path. It's a teacher. Every trail, every climb, every quiet mile. They all say something, if you're willing to listen. Because sometimes, the quietest roads teach the loudest lessons. This is Lunar Overland.